What's good, y'all? Today I'm going to teach you guys how to make your own Crescent shoulder bag with this step-by-step tutorial. I love this design so much because with the adjustable shoulder straps, you can wear it shorter right up under your arm, or you could wear it longer. Plus, it's such a perfect size for carrying all your essentials. They're a lot of fun to make too. It's probably been my most requested pattern, so I figured it was finally time to get you guys the pattern and the tutorial. The link to the pattern is below. Once you get it, it'll be emailed to you as a PDF that you can print off right at home. It'll come with some extra notes, guides, and some chances to win some free things. And then this video will give you all the extra information you need, as well as a step-by-step tutorial to help you make this pattern come to life. I'll be doing some things throughout this video to customize this bag, but the focus of this video is going to be on making this bag in its simplest form. I would say this pattern's in the intermediate range, but at the end of this video, I'll go over some ways that you can make it even more beginner friendly. And on the same note, there's different ways that you can do certain steps throughout making this bag. So I'm going to show you how I choose to do things, but I'll also explain some other ways that you can do things that are maybe just different for the design choice, or that may be a little bit simpler for you too. I hope you guys are as excited as I am. I've had a lot of people asking for this one, so let's get to it.
All you're going to need is the base fabric of your choice, the lining fabric of your choice, the pattern, 2 1-inch buckles, 6 1-inch rectangle rings, at least 18 1/4-inch grommets, a number 5 to number 10 zipper that's at least 11 inches long, then glue, tape, and rivets are optional but highly recommended. For the heavyweight backing, I'm going to be using Celtec, but Decoville Heavy is another great option for something that's more easily accessible. Regardless, I recommend using contact cement or fusible webbing to attach the backing to the base fabric. You'll start by printing the pattern off on 8.5 by 11-inch paper, then you'll want to measure this test square to make sure it printed properly. You can start cutting the pattern pieces out now, being as precise as possible. Then you'll want to start matching all the numbered pieces together, so A1 to A1, A2 to A2, and so on, and you'll tape those pieces together to create the full pieces. Once all the pattern pieces are ready to go, you can start cutting your fabric. Take your time and get as clean of cuts as possible. It's important for everything to be cut very precisely. You also want to mark the middles of all your pieces as you go. Once everything is cut, we'll get into some prep work. As you can see, the heavyweight backing pieces are smaller than their respective base pieces. This is because you don't want to sew the backing into the seams, so I'll start by marking a 1/2 inch from the edge all the way around the bottom of the body pieces. On the top edge, I'm only going to mark 7/16 of an inch from the edge. This is because the top will be folded down, whereas the rest will be sewn into a seam, so it needs a little bit more space to roll. Then, as you can see, the backing will fit perfectly in the area we just marked out. Now on the middle strip piece, I'll mark a 1/2 inch from the edge on the 2 long sides and 7/16 of an inch on the top edges, once again because those edges will be folded and the long edges will be sewn into seams. Once your backing is fused on, we're ready to move on to the buckle straps. I'll take my 2 buckle straps, and on the wrong side, I'm going to mark a 1/2 inch from both of the longer edges and one of the shorter edges, and I'll fuse the backing in place within those markings. Then I'll get some glue on the wrong side and fold this shorter edge up to the backing, which gives me the 1/4-inch fold I need. Once that's folded, I'll mark the middle, get some glue on there, then fold one edge into that middle line and fold the other edge in so that the 2 edges meet in the middle. It should look something like this now. Since we're going to be adding buckles to the straps, we need to add a hole for the buckles to go through. There's a marking on the pattern for where the hole should go. You could use the buttonhole function on your machine to make the hole, but I'm going to choose to hand stitch it. So I'll go ahead and do the hand stitching, just coming up through the bottom, then back down, going through the loop in the thread and pulling it tight. I'll do this all the way around until I get back where I started. Once the holes are done, the buckles will be able to go on nicely, but I'll do that later. First, I'm going to get the rectangle rings on. So on the wrong side, I'll mark 2 inches up from the unfinished edge. Then I'll also mark 1.5 inches and a 1/2 inch. Since the rectangle ring will sit in the middle and I don't want to get glue on it, I'm only going to glue the outer 2 areas. So I'll get some glue in those outside areas, slide the rectangle ring into the middle, and fold the edge to the 2-inch line I marked. Then on the middle strip, I'll mark out where the straps will go. So I'll start by marking the middle, then I'll mark a 1/2 inch in each direction from there, as well as 4.25 inch down from the top edge. I'm going to be matching the edge of the fold up with that lower line, not the edge of the rectangle ring. Now I'm going to mark the areas I'll glue, so I'll start at my lower line and I'll mark a 1/2 inch up, 1 7/8 of an inch, 2.5 inches, and 3 inches. Then I'll mark the strap, so from the edge with the buttonhole, I'll mark down 2 5/8 of an inch, which is where the second rectangle ring will sit. So I'll mark 3/8 of an inch in both directions from that line, and I'll also mark 1 3/4 of an inch down, as well as right up next to the rectangle ring on bottom. I'll get some glue in the outer 2 areas, but not in the middle areas, so I'll match the lower edge with the bottom mark and I'll stick the first area in place. Then I'll slide the second rectangle ring in and I'll stick the upper area down.
Now that everything is prepped, I'm gonna get into the sewing, but first I have a few notes for you guys. First off, I'm going to be sewing everything with a 3mm stitch length for all the seams and a 4mm stitch length for all of the top stitching. Second, I'm going to be sewing everything with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. And finally, I'm going to be using a Tex 90 nylon thread. I'm able to do this because I have an industrial machine. If you're on a domestic machine and can't use heavier weight thread, just use what you can. It'll still turn out beautifully.
I'm gonna hand stitch the strap as a design choice, but typically I'd machine sew it. If I were machine sewing it, I'd sew a rectangle in this lower area, then a small rectangle in this upper area. I don't want to sew all the way up to the top since I want to leave space to sew the lining in. So I'd recommend sewing a rectangle from one ring to the other in the lower area, but just a small rectangle in the upper area. And the same for me, even though I'm hand stitching it, I'm gonna do the full lower area, but I'm only gonna do part of the upper area and stop 7/8 of an inch below the top edge. And I'll finish sewing the strap down once I add the buckle at the end. So I'm gonna do my hand stitching now. For most of you, you'll be machine stitching, so go ahead and do that. I have the strap sewn on and the middle strip is done now. As you can see, I have space at the top, so even when the top is folded down, I'll be able to sew the lining without going over the strap. If you wanna add purse feet to the bottom, there's markings on the pattern you can use to add the feet. I'm gonna finish the body pieces now, so I need to make the piping. I'll cut 2 strips of fabric that are 1 1/4 inch wide and at least 21 inches long, and I'll cut 2 pieces of 1/8 inch cording that are the same length. Then I'll go ahead and make my piping cord, and I'll cut 1/4 inch slits across the whole edge. This will allow it to spread around the curves. To do the piping, you will need a presser foot that can get right up next to the cord, because this is what's going to give you your 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So if you don't have a presser foot that can get up next to it and can't get one, you'll need to skip the piping. On the same note, if you use a different size cord, you'll need to adjust the width of the fabric strip so that you still have your 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm going to get the piping on now. Since you'll be folding the top edge down, you don't want the piping to go all the way up to the top. So you'll want to transfer these markings on the pattern to your body pieces. Then you'll start at one marking and pull the cord off to the side, making sure it's matched up with that mark. Then you'll start spreading it around the curves, matching the edges and clipping it in place. Once you get to the top on the other side, you'll want to cut the cord so that it's ending right above the mark. You'll trim some of the excess fabric and you'll pull the cord off to the side so that it's ending at the mark on this side too. You can baste it on now, so you'll start at one side, sew all the way around, making sure your edges stay lined up and that the cord is staying even with both your lines you marked out. The body pieces should look something like this now. We're almost ready to combine them, but first we need to mark 3/4 of an inch down on both ends of the middle strip as well as across the top edge of both body pieces. We'll be using these lines as a fold guide shortly. Last thing we need to do before sewing is cutting these 1/4 inch slits across both long edges of the middle strip. Similar to the piping, this will allow it to curve around the body pieces. Now we can finally start combining things, so I'll match the middles right sides together at the bottom, then I'll start working it around the curves, clipping as I go and making sure the tops match on both sides too. I can sew it now. Again, this is where you'll need to use a presser foot that can get right up next to the cord. You won't be able to see the cord while you sew, but you will be able to feel it. So just go slow and stay pressed up against that cord, since that's going to give you your 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Then I'll repeat this for the other side, so I'll match the other side of the middle strip with the other body piece and clip them together. Especially if you're using heavyweight backing, this side will be a bit more tedious to sew since things are starting to take shape, but just take your time and you'll be good. Once both sides are sewn, I'm going to baste all the seams so that they face in towards the sides. This will make folding things easier. Once those are all basted, I'm going to go ahead and get the bag turned right side out. Once it's flipped, it's probably going to be a bit deformed, so spend some time working the seams out, making sure all the seams are facing the correct way and that everything is laying flat. You honestly should spend at least 10 minutes just shaping the bag. Once it's shaped, you can hammer these seams down gently to reduce bulk if you have thicker seams like I do. Then I'll go ahead and fold this whole top edge down to the 3/4 inch line I marked out earlier. And once that's done, I can set the base aside for now and I'll start on the lining. First, I'm going to make the zipper connectors, so I'll flip them to the wrong side and mark a 1/2 inch from both shorter edges on all 4 pieces. I'll get some glue in those areas and fold the edges to the lines I marked out. You'll see one of the long edges is straight and one has a slight curve. On the straight edge, I'm going to mark a 1/2 inch in on the wrong side on all 4 pieces, and once again, I'll spread spread some glue, and fold the edges into those lines. Once you've done that, you'll want to mark 3/8 of an inch in on the wrong side of at least the top 2 zipper connectors. Now for the zipper, you'll want a number 5 to number 10 zipper that's at least 11 inches long. I'm also not going to put a zipper pull or stop on yet, since I have to be able to fully separate the zipper. Then on the top of the zipper, I'm going to fold the upper edges to the side edge to create a finished edge right above the top stops, and I'll baste those down. Once I've basted both sides down, I'll take one of my zipper connector pieces and tape it in place, matching the edge of the zipper tape to the 3/8 inch line we marked out earlier. You'll also want to clip the edge of the zipper where you basted it to make sure it's not sticking out past the end. Then I'll flip it to the bottom side and stick another zipper connector in place, matching it up perfectly with the one on the top side. You'll do the same on the other side of the zipper, making sure the ends match up on both sides, then pulling it apart to do the top stitching. So I'll stitch 1/8 of an inch all the way around on all 4 sides, making sure the top and bottom stay lined up as I go. I'm going to combine all the lining pieces. I did the top with the same fabric I used for the outside of the bag so that it matches, which is also why the top and bottom of the zipper connectors were different fabrics, but this is completely up to you. Regardless, before I baste the zipper on, I'm going to cut these little 1/4 inch triangles across the edge to allow it to go around the curve nicely. Then I'll match the middles and work the rest of it around, making sure the edges stay matched up. Then I'll baste it on, sewing 1/4 of an inch from the edge. I'm almost ready to get the top on, but first I'm going to cut 1/4 inch slits across this whole curve to allow it to spread a bit. Then I'll match the middles right sides together and work the top around, keeping the edges lined up. I'll sew it on now with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Go slow. The edges tend to want to shift since these curves are opposites, so just go slow and make sure things stay lined up. Once it's sewn, I'm going to cut 1/4 inch slits in the seam allowance to allow it to spread. Then I'll fold that seam down and top stitch it. So I'll sew 1/4 of an inch from the edge around this whole seam. I like to crease the zipper connectors at the seam to help them sit perpendicular to the lining too. Then I can combine my lining pieces, so I'll match them right sides together and clip them in place. Now I can sew them, starting at the top and sewing all the way around to the top on the other side with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, making sure the seams on both sides stay lined up as I go. I forgot to mention it before, but you'll also want to mark 3/4 of an inch down from the top on both sides. You'll use this as a guide to fold the top edges down shortly. Regardless, once it's sewn, I'll want to top stitch that seam open, but first you're going to need to press it open all the way around. Then you can top stitch it, so you'll sew both sides of the seam to help keep it pressed open. This can be a bit tedious, but just go slow and make sure the seam is staying pressed open, especially as you go around the curves. Once you've top stitched both sides, we can fold the top edge down, but first I'm going to cut 1/4 inch slits all the way around to help it spread. Then once that's done, you can fold the top edge down to the 3/4 inch line you marked out. Now all that's left to do is finish the zipper, so I'll start by getting the zipper pull on. Just make sure both sides stay even as you get it on. Then I'll do the zipper stop. I like to leave about 3 inches of tail past the zipper. Then I'll mark 3/4 of an inch from the edge and use pliers to remove all the zipper teeth up to that mark. Now I'll make the zipper stop. The length of the zipper stop will always be the same, but you may need to change the width depending the width of your zipper. My zipper is 1 1/4 inch wide, so the zipper stop is going to be 2 1/2 inches wide. I'll start by marking a 1/2 inch from the edge on both ends that say fold on the pattern. Then I'll get some glue within those areas and fold the edges into those lines. Then from the other side, I'll mark the middle, spread some glue and fold one side into the middle and fold the other side in so the edges meet in the middle. Once that's done, we can get it on the zipper. So I'll match one side up with the zipper stop 3/4 of an inch in. Then I'll fold the other end in so that they're matched up on the top and bottom. Now I can sew it on. I'll stitch 1/8 of an inch from the edge all the way around to lock it in place. I like to tuck the tail of the zipper down into the lining, and then the lining is done. Quick side note too, you may have noticed I added a zipper pocket and slip pocket. These aren't actual pattern pieces, but I do have the sizes and placements listed in the notes on the front page of the pattern. My lining and body are done now, so I can combine them. I'll stuff the lining down into the body and combine them wrong sides together. I'll match all the middle marks and get everything clipped in place. Once I have them clipped together, I can sew all the way around 1/8 of an inch from the edge. The challenge with this is that the heavyweight backing makes it difficult for you to be able to get in there and spread things enough to be able to stitch it on the top if you're using a flatbed machine. Typically, I'd keep the bag inside out while I stitch the lining, but since this bag is small and structured, this isn't very doable. If you have a cylinder arm or post bed machine, machine, this isn't an issue because you can still get in there and sew all the way around with ease. But assuming most of you don't have either of these machines, you still have some options. First would be just stitching on the lining instead of the top. This will still be a bit tricky, but it's definitely doable to get in there. Second would be to hand stitch it, which of course takes longer, but if you know how to saddle stitch, it could be a better option than machine stitching. Third, if you have a domestic machine where the front slides off to give you this kind of cylinder arm, you'd still have to use a lighter heavyweight backing at most to be able to work the bag around that little arm. And fourth is the simplest. You can always just not use heavyweight backing because then none of this would be an issue since you can just easily get in there with any machine. Before you sew the lining though, you'll need to decide how you want to attach the buckle before doing the lining. I'm gonna wait to do the buckle, so I'll keep the strap out of the way while I sew around, but one option for attaching the buckle would be to sew the strap down when you sew the lining in. Regardless, you can go ahead and sew the lining in now, stitching 1/8 of an inch from the edge all the way around. I start in the middle on one of the sides, that way the back stitching will be hidden under the strap. Go slow as you sew and make sure the lining and body edges stay lined up. Once you've sewn the lining in, all that's left to do is attach the buckles. So you can get those in place. The strap should go down 1/2 of an inch into the lining. Typically I would just add a rivet to attach it, but since I've already been doing the hand stitching, I'm just gonna add a whip stitch to finish the strap. So I'll go ahead and do the hand stitching to finish it. I'm gonna do a whip stitch 1/8 of an inch down on both sides, as well as a 1/2 inch down on both sides. But again, I typically recommend just using a rivet to finish off the strap. Once you have the strap attached, the body of the bag is done and we can move on to the shoulder strap. For the shoulder strap, I'll start with my 2 middle pieces. I'll mark a 1/2 inch down on both edges on the wrong side, then I'll get some glue in there and fold the edges into those lines I just marked. Now I'll mark the middle, spread some glue, fold one side into the middle and fold the other edge in so that they meet in the middle. Once you've done this for both pieces, you can get some glue on the back side, then stick the 2 pieces together, making sure all of the edges match up perfectly. Now for the outer straps, I'll start on the rectangular edge and I'll mark a 1/2 inch in and fold the edge up to that line. Then on the side with the angled edges, I'll mark a 1/2 inch in from the bottom edge, as well as 2 3/8 of an inch up. Then I'll spread some glue and fold the edge to the 1/2 inch line. Now on the angled edges, I'll mark 1 inch in and I'll spread some glue and fold the edge up to that line. It's important to make sure both sides are perfectly even, so I'm gonna make sure the fold ends exactly at that 2 3/8 of an inch line I marked out earlier. Then I'll do the exact same thing on the other angled edge, so both sides are even. Now I'll mark 3/4 of an inch up from the bottom edge, and I'll mark the middle of the strap all the way down. Once again, I'll spread some glue and fold one side into that line and fold the other side in so that they meet in the middle. Just like I did before, I'll make sure the fold ends right at that 3/4 of an inch line on both sides. This will ensure everything is perfectly even. Once all 4 straps are done, I can get some glue on the back of them and combine them together, making sure all of the edges match up perfectly. Now I can sew everything, so on all 3 strap pieces, I'll sew all the way around 1/8 of an inch from the edge to finish everything off. Once all 3 are sewn, I can get the grommets on the outside straps. It's up to you how many grommets you add and how you spread them. I'm gonna start 1 3/4 of an inch up from the bottom edge, and I'll do a grommet every 1 3/4 of an inch from there. This means the last grommet will also be 1 3/4 of an inch from the rivet I'll add at the top. This way all the hardware is spaced evenly. So once I have everything marked out, I'll punch the holes, then I'll go ahead and get all the grommets in place and set them. You can use a press, but I prefer to just hand set them. Once the grommets are on, I'll add the rectangle ring on both sides. I'll start by marking 2.5 inches from the edge on the wrong side of the rectangle end. This is where I'll fold the edge to, then it's up to you how you attach it. You could just sew across the edge or use a rivet, but I'm gonna do a whip stitch and a rivet. So I'll go ahead and do the whip stitch on both sides of the strap. I do have a full tutorial for a whip stitch if you're interested. I'm also gonna add a rivet in the center on both sides for extra security. Again, it's up to you how you attach it. You could do just a rivet, a whip stitch, an X stitch, and so on. This part is optional, but if you wanna make a shoulder pad, you'll need some foam, and you'll start by fusing some fabric to both sides of that foam. Then you can get it cut out. For the pad connectors, it's up to you whether you use backing or not, but either way, you'll get some glue on them, fold one side into the middle, and fold the other side in so that they meet in the middle. Then I'll stitch 1/8 of an inch from the edge on both sides of both connectors. There's markings on the pattern for where the strap connectors will go, so you can use those to get them in place. You'll notice the connectors are slightly bigger than the pad. This is so that there's a bit of arch and the strap can slide in and out. Once they're in place, you can go ahead and sew all the way around 1/8 of an inch from the edge, basting everything together. Now we need to add some binding to cover the edge. I prefer to make my own binding tape, but you can also use store-bought binding. Either way, it'll need to be 3/4 of an inch wide. I'll get it clipped in place all the way around the pad, making sure it's even on both sides. Then also the binding on, stitching 1/16 of an inch from the edge all the way around. Go slow, especially around the curves, to make sure that things stay even on the top and bottom. Once it's done, it should look something like this, and now I can finish off the strap. So I'll attach one side of the middle strap to one of the rectangle rings. Same as I did with the outer strap, I'll mark 2.5 inches back, and that's where I'll fold the edge back to when I attach it to the rectangle ring. I'm going to attach this with a whip stitch and a rivet, the same as I did for the outer strap. Then I'm going to slide the shoulder pad on there and attach the other side of the middle strap to the other outer strap. Once the strap is done, it should look something like this. The nice part with the shoulder pad too is that it's fully removable. I can get the strap on the buckles now. Obviously it's adjustable, so you can put it on at any height you want. The nice part about having these rectangle rings is they help hold the strap down so it's not flapping out. Another reason I spaced the grommets the way I did is so that they'll sit nicely between the rectangle rings, and none of them will be up under one of the rings where the ring and grommet would be scratching on each other.
Once you finish the strap, the bag is done. I think it came out beautifully. The details on this one are so clean, and it was a great way to use some upcycled materials. It really came out so crazy. I think it's such a high quality bag that I look forward to someone getting a lifetime of use out of. Before you go, I'm going to teach you a couple more things that can help with making this bag, and I'll show you the bag on body so you have a size reference. Like I mentioned before, the pattern probably is in the intermediate range, but there are some ways to make it really beginner friendly, so I'm going to run you through those. I use the heavyweight backing because it helps structure things, but in turn it can make things a bit stiffer, which can make things a bit trickier. So if you're not comfortable using the heavyweight backing, you can always just skip that, or you can just use some interfacing or something instead to still give it a little bit of structuring, but without having it stiffer where it may be more difficult to work with, especially if you're on a domestic machine. I also do the piping because it helps add some structure as well, but like I mentioned before, you will need a presser foot that can get up right next to the cord. So if you don't have one and can't get one, you will need to skip the piping. But if it's just making the piping that intimidates you, you can always get store-bought piping as well. But I promise making and sewing the piping really isn't as intimidating as it may seem.
Here's the bag on body with the strap at its longest length, and here it is at its shortest length. For reference, I'm 6'4", so obviously it sits a bit higher on me, but you can always adjust the length of the strap you make if you'd prefer a strap that's a lot longer. I love how this bag and pattern came out though. The details are truly so beautiful.
I hope this tutorial was easy to follow. I'm still learning as I go, so feel free to drop any questions you guys have in the comments, and I'll do my best to help out. If you want to see more of my work, I'm also on Instagram and TikTok, and if you want more tutorials, make sure to subscribe here. I'm going to be doing at least one tutorial a month, hopefully even more, and I'm also going to be doing giveaways for people who purchase my patterns and even people that just comment and subscribe here. So have fun making your shoulder bag. This pattern is so much fun to make, and it can really be customized in so many ways, so get creative with it. I can't wait to see what you guys make. I love y'all.